Gloria in excelsis Deo.
Gloria in excelsis Deo. Welcome to the stream of truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook,
And I'm Sean Kelly.
and just the warmest welcome to you, precious being. Thank you for being here. Today's topic is You Are a Miracle Vessel.
Yeah,
How exciting is that?
it's very exciting.
Would it be okay if I just start with why I wanted to talk about this today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pipe in with whatever comes in as we're going, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So what happened was yesterday, I received an email for my daughter to register for her, bless you, classes at the Nashville School of the Arts. And I had this huge sort of awareness that so many of my heartfelt prayers have been answered in my life. And I was really overwhelmed when I thought about all of the intentions and prayers that I have held, let's say over the past 10 to 15 years, and how many of them have been answered, some of them in miraculous ways. And I was just really overcome by this awareness. And I think what it was is right now I have certain prayers and intentions and manifestations that I'm bringing through. And I think I can get a little bit focused on what am I bringing through now, and sort of lose sight of all of the amazing gifts that have come through already. And so I just had this beautiful, blissful experience yesterday of looking at all of the answered prayers, miracles, manifestations that have come through for me over the past 10 to 15 years. It really blew my mind. Pretty much everything that I had been holding in my heart, let's say 10 years ago, has manifested. Pretty much everything. Things that I never thought were possible, things that were very heavy on my heart. I was really amazed. And I just wonder if for everyone listening, if you have a similar experience, if you look back at what you were really holding in your heart, say 10 years ago, and where you are today, what do you see? Has a lot come in for you, actually? So I'm just amazed. And I just rest in so much gratitude to Spirit for bringing all of this through me. And I'm really stunned when I really look at it.
Yeah. Maybe we want to talk about how we see miracles. What a miracle is to us. What does that mean? And then we can go from there as well and talk more about maybe because we have to sort of the way that I see it is, in order to receive what we desire or what we're thinking is sort of aligned for us, we have to be open to that thing. So
Yes.
so there's a part of our responsibility involved in opening ourselves to receive, as well as to believing that we can receive and all these other things. So, but I was curious, what if you wanted to talk about how you see a miracle, maybe I'll talk about it as well.
I'm so glad what you just said. Okay, so I'm still sort of figuring out how I really define a miracle, but piggybacking off of what you just said, I think partly for me, a miracle is something where at some point in time, I thought something was impossible. My human thought something maybe I wanted it so much, but it just seemed so difficult. And I really didn't know how to bring it through me. So some feeling of something, at least to my human, feels very, very difficult, possibly impossible. And then, as you said, I think part of what happens in this process is actually spirit takes us through the necessary initiations for who we need to become for the miracle to come through us. And part of that, as you said, is we must at some point shift and believe it is possible. So if we held a belief that it wasn't possible, in order for the miracle to come through, there does need to be some shifting, just a tiny little bit even, that it is possible. And so, yeah, so I think that's how I would at this point somewhat define a miracle. Something my human self at some point didn't think was possible. But over time, as spirit moved me through my transformations, I began to see it could be possible. And as I shifted and transformed, eventually the miracle came through me. And maybe if it's okay, I could just sort of flesh this out, illustrate this with a concrete example.
Sure.
Okay. So I use this example a lot. This example probably has been one of the biggest teachings, expansions in my lifetime. I'm so grateful for it. So during my divorce custody situation, as I've talked about many times on the stream, it was very acrimonious in the beginning, really for at least a year. I think over a year, my ex-husband and I were just in a battle, seemingly to the death. We were just private detectives, court hearings, sort of ganging up on each other, pitting other people against each other, everything, both of us. We both were doing it. It seemed at that time that a resolution to our custody situation was impossible. That's how my human felt at that time. It felt like, oh my goodness, maybe we're just going to be in court battles for years. Maybe that's what's going to happen. My human could not see a peaceful resolution to this situation. She could not see it. And then what happened was my higher self really stepped in. Praise the Lord. Gloria in excelsis Deo. My higher self stepped in and took over. Thank goodness. And basically showed me that the way I was handling this divorce custody situation was not in highest and best, and helped me. I say that I put down my sword. This is what I said to my ex-husband. I'm laying down my sword. I said to him, I'm no longer fighting you. I'm sorry that I was fighting you. I want peace, and I want us both to feel good about whatever we decide. This was just totally my higher self finally taking over. So this was an initiation that my higher self was taking me through. I had to learn highest and best in order for the miracle to come through. I was not acting in highest and best. I was acting very much in maybe somewhat more of the mainstream orientation of fighting and my own human agenda and all that. So basically, I had to go through this initiation of learning highest and best orientation. And as I learned that orientation and I laid down my sword, I've talked about this before, we ended up doing what I call the sacred circle for about 10 weeks together. And through this sacred circle, truly a miraculous custody agreement came through us, through spirit. So the way I see it is I had to shift in who I was and the energy I was holding for the miracle to come through. So I see that many miracles happened here. I see that it was a miracle in a way that I shifted out of this egoic, self centered, battling mindset into this more divine, highest and best God self orientation, which truly feels like I'm so glad that I went through that shift. That's amazing. And then because my energy shifted, this miracle could come through me.
Beautiful. Um, so so you see miracles a little differently than I do. It seems. So not so much different. Not so much different, but like the same principles sort of apply. And you also kind of mentioned that you had to have that insight to change in order to have the miracle come in. So the way that I see it, with the way that I sort of view reality, is that the miracle to me is not the outcome; it's the frame of mind change that you mentioned. That is the miracle to me. What happens outside of that is always up to circumstance and it's variable. But what persists and lasts throughout time eternal is the new understanding and insight that I can show up more authentically as my God self here in this area. It basically we've established permission to be more divine, basically, is usually how I perceive a miracle.
I just want to say, I love that you're highlighting that, because as I was speaking about it, I was realizing that it was a miracle that my consciousness shifted. And I hadn't really thought about it that way until I was speaking about it. And then you highlighting that, I love that.
Yeah,
The
like
consciousness shift is the miracle.
everything is vibration, right?
Yeah.
So in order for an external thing or a relationship or anything to shift, it has to change within us first, which
Yes.
we know, right? And
Yes.
that is where I would say is the miracle.
Yes.
The miracle
Yes.
isn't the outcome of what happens, it's just the result. It's the natural result of the expansion of consciousness.
Yes. Yes.
And so there's a few different things that I wrote here randomly about miracles. I don't know. I guess they're just channeled. These are probably, yeah, I would say this is just channeled stuff. So I'll just say what came through, and then we could talk about that or something. So miracles are timeless. Basically, they operate on nonlinear domains, so they're not it's not about action or what is said or any of this. It's about an insight, basically, or a revelation, or a spontaneous sort of healing. You could consider it, like where suddenly you realize something and the load just lightens and you're able to raise up when you weren't able to before. And so miracles can happen just internally without anything, like just inside yourself, you receive a miracle of insight, or you can offer miracles to others as a hollow bone, open conduit to source, just basically by channeling. So actually what I'm offering here about the miracles are miracles. So because I didn't think it up. So it's basically from the divine intelligence that runs and guides me around. Just being able to tap into that itself is a miracle. And so the next thing is that miracles are gifted by the divine. So it's a gift. So we should be grateful for it, which of course Tassel has been. She's been expressing gratitude to me a lot about all of this stuff. And then the next one is miracles are natural and not appropriately awe-inspiring. So what I take this to mean is that it says awe, and then awe is best reserved for revelation. So a miracle can inspire revelation because a miracle sort of is the insight and the healing, and then revelation comes after the consciousness raises, and then there's more insight. So um, the miracles, basically, it's natural. It's natural for us to receive miracles constantly, to deliver miracles to others constantly, and to live in a world of just miracle giving and receiving. That's natural for us. So the reason that we find what seems miraculous to be awe inspiring to us is because we have resistance to the idea that this is a natural thing that sort of the creator is wanting to always gift you with. So it's important because sometimes we hype ourselves really up, like, oh, look at how crazy that was. It wasn't, though. It was exactly as is natural and normal when you're in a sane operating mindset. When you're in insanity, which is separation from the creator, from yourself, and from others, then you can't receive miracles in that state properly unless unless sort of you're offered miracles by a miracle giver, which would be something acting through the divine, or the divine acting through a vehicle of some kind, like an angel or a human, even. Um, but basically, you're not able to really get miracles if you're insane. And when I say insane, I just mean separation. I don't mean the clinical term. Um, I'm using like the term that Eckhart Tolle would use, or other people have said it as well. The insanity of separation, believing that we are separate beings and all that other stuff, is what I mean by insanity.
So just to pause here, because I think what you're saying is really profound. What you're saying is miracles are actually the natural order for us when we are in tune, in alignment, not separated from source. And what I want to sort of add to that is I can just see so clearly that everything in my lifetime that I've experienced has been in service to what I set out to expand on as a soul. That this whole idea that everything is always happening for us, everything is always happening for us. Things that we look at as, that the human might look at as negative or painful or challenging, it's all part of this magical process of our expansion that our soul has set out for us. And what I've also just been getting from my own guidance is there's a bit of a mix here. There's the human has their dreams and intentions for what they want to bring through in this lifetime, and then the soul does too. And sometimes there's a complete overlap. But what I'm also getting in from my guidance is sometimes there's just stuff the human wants that is somewhat not necessarily on the soul's plan, but that those are possible as well. And I also want to express that what we consider a miracle, I'm seeing in a more expansive way at this point. And I want to share an example of what I now see as a miracle, which I didn't see as a miracle before. Before I ended up separating from my ex-husband, we had just moved to Tennessee. We were kind of starting a new life. We had moved here from Florida, and we had just bought and moved into a very expensive farm property. And it was my vision that was going to be like a retreat center and all this stuff. So it was really my idea to move there. And the first night we were in this new, very expensive farmhouse that was really my idea, I had this experience of I was standing in the doorway looking into the master bedroom, and I saw a black shroud unfurl over my body. And it was very clear what the meaning of this was. It was, Tassel, if you stay here in this marriage, there will be a death. And I wasn't sure if it was a physical death. I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, or if it was more of a psychic death, depression or disassociation. But it was very clear. And there had been signs all along for me to leave. And this, I felt like Spirit was just like, we're showing you pretty clearly right now. Time to leave. I now see that as a miracle. I see that experience that Spirit gave me as a miracle, At the time, I didn't really see it as a miracle.
It was probably a little scary, a little bit.
It was, the experience itself was really amazing, but what it meant I had to do was
That's what I meant,
most painful thing, because I didn't want to leave my children.
Yep.
My children at that time were still pretty young. I know your children were very young when you ended up leaving. My children were all like 10 and under. My youngest was like 7, I think 7 or 8. So that's what was so uncomfortable for me. I felt like I was leaving my children, basically.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it now is, this was a beautiful miracle for me. And my consciousness had to shift enough for that to come in. I had to somehow be open to leaving, I think, for that miracle to come in. And the path that led me on has been indescribably beneficial to my soul. Had I stayed in that situation, I think it wouldn't have been so great. So I see that as a miracle as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's hard to actually define miracles. And I think just as long as we recognize that, like, whatever we consider to be miraculous in the physical, like, it started as energy. It started as our consciousness opening up that to the idea that this thing could be possible, right? Like, first it was a desire that we thought we couldn't have, therefore we didn't have it, or something like that. So we actually want to take our focus off of outcome in order to really create the mindset that will draw miraculous outcome to us. So basically, we don't have to actually, like, the way that I try to teach it is that we don't have to actually tell the divine what we want at all. We don't have to do that. The divine already knows exactly what you want. You don't have to say it, right? Like, just, we have this idea as humans that, oh, I have to say it, and you can, and affirmations are helpful, and none of that hurts. But, like, if you really truly desire something, the creator knows that. Like, it's not a secret, right? So you don't have to then continuously remind the creator and say, don't forget, I want this. Ah! All of that draw, to pull, to pray for it, to do whatever, it is coming from fear. It's because we're afraid that we can't have it that we're doing that. We're asking God to give it to us because we're afraid that we can't have it. God's trying to give it to us, in other words, trying to, and we're going, please, I want it, please. And we're not paying attention to what's going on. We're denying that we can have it by the simple act of thinking we must call for it and do these things. So basically, we can notice our preferences and desires and just let it go to God. And if we want to do a prayer to do that, sure. But it's just getting the idea that we don't actually have to call anything. Um, all we really have to do, all we're really, if we want to know what's going to happen in our future, we just have to tune in to what we feel we are going to be doing, right? Like, and
Is it okay if I just say
sure,
something real quick? So I think the power of the prayer for some people is to keep us in the faith energy. And, what I hear you saying is, of course, Spirit knows what our intentions and our dreams are and is always trying to bring this through
yeah. I'm
us.
not meaning to dismiss prayer. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to correct the
Yeah,
thought.
and I just wanted to highlight that I know for me, sometimes I can fall out of faith. Sometimes I can get into fear. And if we're constantly in that state, it is harder for these prayers and miracles to come through us because we don't believe it's possible because we're in fear. So I think the power of, if it resonates for people, the power of affirmations or prayer can be just simply to help us stay in that faith state. And I'll just give a quick example of this. A couple of years ago, I was facing a very scary licensure exam. Um, there were all these rumors about the exam that it's so hard and people take years to pass it and some people never pass it. And as a single mom, it felt really important for me to get my license so I could provide for my kids. And I had a lot of fear that was coming up just because it was kind of like you either pass it and you can make money or you don't pass it and maybe you can't. So it was like a big, scary monster to me. And so for 2 months, as I was preparing to take this exam, I basically just prayed every day. And it just helped me stay in my faith alignment and just helped me kind of control my fears. And so I just think the power of prayer when we're up against something that feels really big for us. And in this lifetime, many of us are facing some pretty big fears from other lifetimes too that we're clearing. And for me, for instance, my Chiron wound is around making money. So this was really my Chiron wound coming up for me. So the praying was so helpful for me to stay in my faith, and I passed with flying colors. I think because I stayed in my faith, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Vibration and frequency, and until we're like really, 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 really in tune, it's a feedback loop system. So prayer and affirmation basically help remind us and hold a frequency of faith, like you said, or
Yes,
trust,
yes,
or whatever. The part of the so all my point really was to just get to the idea first that we have to ask at all,
yes,
because I'm trying to illustrate that there's a purity of faith that is so pure that the word faith itself is meaningless. That
yes,
that there's nothing
yes,
else to perceive but faith and truth.
yes,
So there's nothing to want or to ask for. So uh, there is a state past the asking. So I'm only basically just trying
yes,
to mention that prayer is helpful to, like you said, create a feedback loop in yourself that just reaffirms what you believe. It's a way to program you. You know, we talk about being in the matrix and being programmed um, by fear and whatever, education systems, all the various things, and that's all true. But we can do the same exact thing with positivity as well, and that's sort of what the healthy or the aligned ego or divine ego or whatever people call it. This is the identity that's then let go of the older fear stuff and has aligned with truth, and is trying to create from truth now. Um, so uh, so yeah. So anyways, I that's the only reason I was sort of saying that, not to ever dismiss prayer or anything or try to make it
yeah,
sound
yeah.
like it
No, I
shouldn't.
think I think it's just great that you brought up this further stage of just living like it's just natural.
You become you
We're
become
not.
the prayer.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so you are.
Exactly.
There's no need to remind yourself as much
Yes.
because you are the
Yes.
prayer. So,
Yes.
um,
Absolutely.
or you are. I like to call it the word. You are the prayer, or you are the word.
And then
Basically,
there's
you'll
just,
hear it all constantly. There's nothing to affirm at
yes,
that point usually.
exactly. And then it feels like there's this sort of intermediate stage. Maybe some people go right to that. I know for me, there was sort of an intermediate stage of using prayer to keep my faith.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
the same actually when we ask the Creator for forgiveness. It's the same thing. We're actually asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't really a concept like that the Creator actually uses itself. There's nothing to forgive, really. So
Yes.
so so
Yes.
we're asking for them to do something that they don't really understand how to do. Like we created
Yes.
the concept that we could be guilty.
Right.
The Creator
Right. That
didn't
we
create
would
that
need
that way.
forgiveness.
Like the
Yes.
Creator created a
Yes.
mechanism for us to know ourselves, and then in our
Yes.
free will we created guilt. And
Right.
so
I
then the
love
Creator's
that.
like, why would you do that? Why'd you guys go do that for?
Right.
And then he's like, children, you're being dumb. You're being dumb.
Yeah, that's
I'm trying to give you miracles, and you're just yelling at each other.
right. Right. Right.
So
All these human creations of distortion really outside of
basically,
love.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so we always try to justify with our ego the unjustifiable, which is justice. Uh, leave justice to God.
Yeah.
It's the law of you know, the, some people call it um I can't remember what they call the law, but they call there's it's basically karma that that sort of governs itself. Like it's a natural built-in law to reality that we have sort of corrective measures in place when we act out of line, out of harmony with the creation. It's
Yeah.
it's it's built in. So the idea that the human has to do something wrong and then correct each other and themselves with shame and guilt is
Punishment.
and
Yeah.
punishment is an aspect of the Creator's like, why are we, there's nothing to forgive. And you can even just think about, why would we do this? Like, so it's because we're all insane, basically. But like, you take an abuse, a person who's abused, they become an abuser. Then they go and beat up a guy, let's say, and like maybe they break some of his bones or something in a fight. Out of nowhere, they just attack this guy. Now the world goes, whoa, this person has just attacked this guy and broken his nose, put him in the hospital. We should put this person in jail. They're dangerous. So yeah, they are dangerous. They should probably be isolated from the rest of society in a certain way. But what we do instead of isolating and looking for healing,
Yes.
what we
We
do,
punish.
we punish and we actually strip them of humanity. So we give them
Yes.
a number, take their name away. We give them a
Yes.
number. We put them in a box, like in a hole, basically, with a whole bunch of other people that have been abused and have done abusing, to basically be bullied and abused further in this system where they're not a human, and have no real rights. They're abused by guards. They're abused by other inmates. People make jokes about like what happens in prison sexually, like as
Yeah.
if it's funny that
Yeah.
other humans are being like molested and things.
Yeah.
And it's insane. It's insane. And then we
Yes.
wonder why they
Yes.
come out of that system and
Yes.
then abuse further, right? Like because they've been
Yes.
abused like more. They just continually are seeing abuse. And so the Creator just sort of is kind of like all of that cycling of that. It just gets worse and worse and worse until eventually someone has to go, oh, this is really stupid, guys. This is pretty stupid that we're doing this.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to just share a similar experience that was so profound for me. I did some of my clinical internship during my doctorate studies at a homeless shelter in South Florida. And very similar to how you've described what people's experiences are in prisons. And I know you've had a certain experience here too. Um, the way that generally mainstream mental health institutions pathologize um, people who are without homes is really shocking. And I did a lot of clinical intakes of these clients. And as you said about the prison population, almost everyone has come from poverty, has come from abuse, has come from different addiction issues. So this phrase that has helped me so much is, how does this person's behavior make sense given their context? Yeah, just like people who end up in prisons or people who end up in homeless shelters, there's always a context. And in our society, we can just tend to totalize these people, that there's something wrong with them. And that's why they're in these prisons or homeless shelters. And I saw it as the opposite. I saw it as these people who've led this life, they have so much to teach me and those of us working at this institution. Just to spend one day in a homeless shelter or one day in a prison, wow, the strength that requires of a person to survive that, because it's so dehumanizing,
yeah,
is really amazing.
it really, really is. And just for people who don't know, I can speak pretty experientially to a lot of these things. I didn't spend time in prison, but I did spend a good 24 hours strapped to a bed in a mental institution. And I was like literally restrained to the bed, not like with those fluffy and leather strap things, whatever those are.
Wow.
And that was my phobia, was being restrained, unable to move at all, right? Like
Wow.
that was my biggest fear, of being stuck and not being able to move at all.
Wow.
It was actually what really led me to perfect disassociation from the body. So it was perfect, right? And so even that was perfect, because I was so scared and afraid of not being able to move at all, and everyone ignoring my screaming. Like my voice was just, it felt like my throat was gonna bleed because I was screaming at them to let me out, just let me out of the restraints. But it's a blessing and it's a miracle, and I'm sort of bringing it up because these conditions are brought about sometimes to help facilitate various things in the awakening. And in my case, just because of my practice and what I'm here to do, I had to learn how to let go of the body in a way. And so in magical practice, there'll be a lot of facilitation of that somehow. So the old mystery schools would like bury people and stuff, like to do this, exactly this, just to cause so much fear that they have to face it. They have no choice, and they go through an initiation of that type. So I ended up doing that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not all bad. Like, we have to recall that not only did the prisoners as well, and the homeless people, or the whoever, that is their soul's like choice to be as they are and like be in all that. And that's okay too. Like, we can feel so much empathy because we care. We know that that must be hard, and we feel empathy because we can see it. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not as it's meant to be. And we can offer aid to anyone always, and I think we should always offer whatever aid we can offer. But we also have to respect that they're a soul, a sovereign divine soul on their journey. Just because they're homeless doesn't mean they're in a worse place. It just appears that way to you or to us,
Yes.
right? It's really important to put that all in perspective and just be like,
Yes,
these people running around doing what they're doing, I don't know what their plans are, what anything there is that they're doing. I don't know what any of it is. It must be perfect for them. It must be. There's no other option. And you can just look at your own life and be like, yeah, it's always been perfect for me. It's the same thing for
exactly.
them. So it's
Yes.
really just to remember humility and like, so because I was the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm trying to like repair my own criticism of the what's it called, judicial system of like the penitentiaries and prisons and whatever. I was criticizing all of that, and I'm just trying to remind myself primarily, but everyone else as well, that all criticism is just non-acceptance of the reality. The reality is that humanity is exploring punishment and judgment, right? That's what they're doing. So I can sit here and be like, you guys are being dumb, but they don't know they're being dumb. So
Yes.
and they're not going to just listen to this dude on the internet who says, "Hey guys, you don't actually have to do that and you can still make people stop hurting each other." Whoa.
Yeah.
Like
So
anyway, so I'm just trying to sort of change the perspective because I said some stuff that was like kind of making fun of or sort of pointing at the system that we're in.
well, what I hear you saying, and I agree, is that we can trust in the divine order of all that is happening. We can trust it's all happening to serve the highest and best. And at the same time, part of what's happening in the divine order is for, maybe think of it as like our human self to sort of be aware that, oh, I'm not really seeing love here in the way maybe people in prison or mental institutions or homeless shelters are treated. So, but that's perfect for us to see that. That's part of the divine order of what we're experiencing, is for our human self to just sort of notice, where is there love here? Is there not love here? But our God self to understand it's all perfect. It's all in the divine order of things. And as you said, to have humility, my little human self, I don't know the whole plan here. And I love too that you're bringing up that your experience in those 24 hours of being strapped to a bed served many purposes for you and could be termed a miracle. And at the same time, for your human, was really challenging and maybe possibly traumatizing
Yeah,
to
it's
you.
probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me, I would say.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and so isn't that interesting that you can experience it on all those different levels, that for the human, very traumatic, maybe still some trauma to work out, on a soul level, very expansive and brought you a lot of gifts.
What I remembered is that I've done that hundreds of times. So after I did it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember now. So
Yeah.
it's
And the
not
way,
a thing anymore. But
the way that I kind of conceptualize a lot of this is that as soul, we have these expansions that we're doing in our lifetimes, and spirit or life is kind of like the trainer in the gym. So if you have a trainer in a gym, you have this intention to get in more shape, and your trainer is going to take you through what you need to do to get there, and some of it is going to be really uncomfortable. And I see life in the same way. I have these intentions as a soul of different ways to expand, and I'm down here, and some of it is going to be really uncomfortable to my human self, but it's all serving not only my expansion, but yeah, obviously the whole universal infinite intelligence expansion.
yeah, there. So something I'd like to highlight as well is when I was put there, and I'm not going to linger on any of this, but when I was put there, I was actually in the midst of like a whole chaotic thing in my experience that had nothing to do with I was going through spiritual awakening, but unaware that I was doing that. I was ascending, but unaware that that was occurring. So I was having a lot of the normal awakening issues with like looking at reality and being like, well, what's the point? That's not real. Like, I can see that that is not real. So, like, what's the point of all that? Like, so for example, money. Like, and I work and support my children and all that, and going through a lot of weird stuff with all these, feeling very hopeless, really, that like the reality, like grieving sort of that what I thought the world was is not really what it is. But I didn't understand what I was actually doing or grieving. So I was in my own whole thing, and then I experienced the hospitalization, and the and had this other miracle, which was like later gonna help me in my magic practice. This was before I even knew about any of that stuff. So my point is just that it's a non-linear, timeless thing. It doesn't even really matter what the human self thinks it's learning in the moment. Later, you'll look back and go, "Oh yeah." Like the miracle becomes more and more apparent, and it actually only sort of grows. Not only did I learn this and this, but oh, I actually also learned this, and then it's like this ballooning growth of, and you had no concept of it. And so that's how you can like trust. Like, there's nowhere in my wildest imagination did I think that I would ever go through anything like that, ever. You know, like this was not a thing that I was like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to disassociate from the body. I wasn't thinking that way. So, you
Yes,
know,
it's amazing how we're talking about this, because it's really just as we're talking about it today on the stream that I'm really looking at everything that's happening in my life is a miracle. And maybe particularly the
oh,
things that my human might view as very negative and very uncomfortable, because we talk about this all the time. We talk about that it is through our most uncomfortable, painful experiences that we usually gain the greatest gifts. And I'll just bring up another example in my own life. During this divorce custody situation that I talk about all the time, to my human, I experienced severe betrayals from a lot of women who I thought were my friends, and they wrote letters against me as a human, against me as a mother. And together with some other stuff that my ex-husband had put together, my ex-husband's attorney basically asked for full custody of my children. So to me, this felt like the most severe betrayal I could experience. Basically, people doing things so that it would be possible that I would lose my children. I saw this as, just horrific, and it took me years to get over it. But what I can look at it now as actually a miracle, because it gave me so many different gifts to have gone through that experience. And I'll just say one of the gifts is it made me fearless. It made me fearless because I sat in court. I might start to cry here, but I sat in court for over an hour while the judge was in his chambers, basically deciding our custody. And one of the last words I heard my ex-husband's attorney say is, "We're asking for full custody of these children." And then the judge went into his chambers. So I sat for an hour confronting the possibility that I had lost custody of my children. And it was the greatest fear I think I could experience in this lifetime. That didn't actually, in the end, happen. But because I experienced, I would say, my greatest fear, it has freed me of fear, because everything that I confront now in my lifetime can never compare to that. Whatever I'm going through now, to have faced losing my children permanently, nothing compares to that. So
Yeah.
it helped me become fearless.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that's sort of like the gift of, we tend to get challenged with our deepest fear. We actually draw it to us because we are so afraid of it. So we end up, it's like a perfect storm that we tend to pull in some way when we're ready to traverse it. So
Yes. And I want to just say one last thing about that I don't think this is uncommon. I have seen many, many lifetimes where I lost my children in different
yeah,
ways.
yeah,
And so I think that was also a miracle because all of that was coming up to clear in this
yeah.
lifetime for my ascension.
Hmm.
I had tons of energy, fear, grief around losing my children in general. So that situation brought that all up for me so I could clear it as well.
Yeah, and for mine was mostly about torture and imprisonment, um, which I have tons and tons of in my
Um,
lifetimes, tons and
yeah.
tons of that, because I always go to planets and places that are in trouble. The places,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, when I get there, the place is fucked. So, uh, like that's always the case for me, because that's where I go. I go where uh, we're called the brothers and sisters of sorrow, and we go to where the sorrow is calling us. And when there is sorrow, something messy's going on. So usually, when something messy's going on, there's some type of barrier, systemic barrier that gets in the way of what I'm trying to do, uh, which ends up causing imprisonment and torture and other types of things like that, like burning at the stake, that type of stuff, as far as human Earth terms go. But you can imagine the variety of the creation, other planets, other star systems have done the same thing. So there's always a new shadow, basically, that comes in that's dealt with. But the you hold on to the karmic sort of imprints, and then those patterns will repeat. They don't have to be as intense or as extreme as some of the things that have happened in past lives, but they have to be close enough that it likens to it, and then we can basically do what Tassel said and heal it and move through it.
Yes.
If
And
it's
if I can,
okay, go
oh,
ahead.
do you mind if I to say
Sure, yeah.
one?
And then when you're done, I just wanted to talk about miracles, because I wanted to talk about what it's like when your cities begin to activate, and what to expect in that area as far as when the cities turn on. Uh, what type of miracles are you going to see then, and how's that going to work, and how you should traverse that, in my opinion.
Awesome. I'll just say one final point about what we've been talking about is in all of these lifetimes that we come through and incarnate, we're always expanding. This is how the creator knows itself through all these different experiences and expansions. And we go through very pleasant, joyful experiences, and we go through some very challenging, somewhat traumatic experiences. And what is eternal is the expansion. And what we're clearing for a lot of us in this lifetime as we're ascending is just sort of the more traumatic aspects of it. So the expansion is eternal, and the sort of the suffering, uncomfortable part, we can clear that. So that's how I see a lot of the ascension process is really just clearing the energy of the pain, is clearing that and leaving us with the expansion.
Yeah, and actually, depending on the target location, like, so for example, because there's massive karma here to clear around imprisonment, false imprisonment, justice, punishment, all these things, a lot of people like me will come to work on that karma to lighten the planetary karma load of that. So it's a perpetuating cycle from a global level, but also the soul that comes is attracted to come because they have a bias towards working on particular types of karma that they've been working on for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So they're attracted to Earth because Earth will give them opportunity to work on that karma, uh, because Earth has this sort of really wide spectrum of like really dark, weird stuff, but then also really, really light, positive stuff. So there's, it's sort of like a free for all here in a way.
Yes. And I think it's so interesting for a lot of us in the ascension path to just look at this lifetime and see, wow, maybe there have been a lot of these very intense experiences, possibly with a bunch of different people. And it's just like, this is the granddaddy lifetime to clear so much.
Yeah, yeah, it always feels like that too, actually. Like each time, like basically every time we awaken, it kind of feels like, oh, this is like, oh, this is the last one or something, because it's the most sort of recent and linear time, and it feels like that. I think actually at this time it is probably mostly the case for people here, but it's not the end of anything. It's just the ending of a cycling here.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about the cities a little bit. People get a little confused about cities and how those work and what it is. And so my basic tenuous grasp of what these things are is when the body and consciousness that's inhabiting Sean sort of realizes itself to enough of a degree, it starts to have divine powers, divine gifts, you could call them. These are natural. They're natural things that you can do innately. Like it's part of you to be able to do these things, such as levitate, teleport, time travel, float, fly, whatever, telekinesis, all of these different things. And so I say that, and then you're like, so does that mean, Sean, that you're saying that you could just start floating right now? And no. Actually, there's two primary purposes to the cities. The first primary purpose is to make the individual aware that these things are possible and real. So primarily, we're just signaling to ourselves that we need to be responsible with ourselves. Because if we're not responsible, we can do tremendously damaging things, tremendously powerful changes to our environment, tremendously powerful. And it's a way for us to realize who we are more truly. It has nothing to do with doing things. So almost never, you're never going to see someone like myself who, so I'll just express two of them. The first is spontaneous healing. So I was doing what I called my Jesus walk, and I took my shoes off, and I was walking on the road and the sidewalk and stuff, and down at the lake without shoes on. I walked through glass and dirt and all this stuff. My feet were ripped all apart and bleeding. And I sat down at the sidewalk side, and I just put my hands over my feet, and I just asked for them to be healed so that I could keep walking. And then I kept walking, but it was still hurting, so I decided to walk to the hospital. When I got to the hospital and the doctor looked at my feet, they were healed. So nothing. It was the same day. It was an hour after an hour and a half after I did it. When I looked at my feet prior to that, there was glass inside of my feet. Like I had collected bits of things that were in my feet, bleeding, all of this. And I went into the doctor, and then he's like, your feet are fine. And I was like, but they hurt. And then I realized they don't hurt actually. So I don't know when it healed. I don't know what happened, but this is how the cities are. They're spontaneous. They're not so much controllable the way that you would imagine they are. what ends up happening is people experience this and then they go, I have to learn how to harness this. Then they spend their whole lives trying to like actively concentrate enough to activate cities and to do things. And they basically get confused at the whole purpose of it. The purpose of it has nothing to do with any of that. We're not like basically when the whole collective's ready, that's when we'll start to float around and stuff. But until that time, people that have noticed the capacity to do these things are not meant to be godlike. I'm not meant to seem godlike at all. It would be entirely divesting from the purpose of my being here, which, so despite me knowing I can do these things, I am unable to will it. Like, I'm too aware that it's deeply, deeply, deeply irresponsible for me to do it. Like, at this stage, it just means that I can sense that the humanity is not ready. Therefore, there's not even, I don't even try. In other words, I don't even try to do anything. I don't try to heal myself or do anything because there's no point to it. The second one was teleportation, which or time travel. This was time travel, and I'll just briefly explain. Same exact thing. I was driving in my car. This is another thing that's really interesting about time travel, teleportation, as well as people that have extraterrestrial encounters. A lot of times they're driving in their car. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything, but I find it very odd that a lot of people are driving in their car. If you listen to some of the or read Dolores Cannon, she'll talk about a lot of her sort of patients or subjects are, in their vehicles when stuff happens. So I was really wanting to get back to the house, in order to catch Tassel's stream because I had told her I would come to or she had done a premiere. I had told her that I would come to the one prior and I think I forgot or something. I got distracted and I felt really bad about that. So, and this is funny because it's just a simple little thing, but it felt really important to me that I made it. Like I really wanted to make it. I said I would. And so I was like 20 minutes away from the house, 15 minutes away from the house. And so we all know that feeling of like when we're driving down a familiar path, we can sometimes kind of space out and go on autopilot, right? So that feeling happened. The issue though is that I wasn't in the autopilot because of all the fog. So there was so much fog like in the street that I couldn't actually tell where I was, really. Like I could tell I'm on the road. And I had been on the road before, but I couldn't actually see any of the environment. Like you can only really do that autopilot when you're like aware of, like I had to pay attention a lot because I couldn't see properly. So I was kind of really present, paying attention. And then it just seemed like I was a kilometer further than I had been, or so. Maybe a little further than that, like a kilometer and a half. It was as if I just, bloop, and then as soon as it happened, I was immediately aware of it. And I was like, what just happened? It seemed like I teleported. Like there was no car in front of me. And then suddenly there's a car in front of me. Like it was a little further. It's possible that it just like emerged out of the fog, I guess. But it was as if it came out of nowhere. But the weirdest thing about it is, I've done this drive about 1 billion times. I was down near my ex-wife's house, and I was coming back to my house. So my kids are there or in that area. I would always take the same way. It's very, I know how long it takes. There's not a lot of traffic. It's just some stop signs. So it's not like a variable route. I think I was explaining this to Tassel. It's not a variable route. It's not like a route where you go for a time and then you could run into traffic, and sometimes it takes longer than it's like it takes like almost exactly 14 minutes or so every time. So if it took 14 minutes, I was going to be late for the premiere. So I could see just looking at my phone on the GPS, just like because I wanted to know like how long is it going to take me to get back. Before I even left, I was like, oh, I'm going to be late. I knew I was going to be late. Like I was aware just based on the time, like. unless I really speed, I'm going to be late, and I'm not going to speed and be dangerous. So I'm I'll just be late, I guess, if I'm late. But I really didn't want to be late, and as I left, I started to really like think about how I didn't want to be late and how important it was. And then I seemed to teleport. Uh, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know what happened, but I got there on time. Actually, as I pulled into the driveway, the stream came on. Like at literally as I stopped, I put the vehicle into park. I picked my phone up and the stream came on. Like because I was waiting, right? So it literally started it was at because we do a 2-minute countdown. It was at 1:58 in the 2-minute countdown as I pulled into the house. So it was like perfect timing to be there, and I couldn't have made it. Like there wasn't enough time to make it. And then I had the weird experience of feeling like I just bloop. So those two things together made me go, I kind of think I did. I kind of think I did. I don't know.
Amazing.
But
And I
anyways,
just,
the only reason I wanted to say those two examples is because these things happen. Don't worry about them. Just sort of smile at them. Think about how amazing they are, how cool it was. Kind of recognize that maybe be a little normally skeptic about it. Like you don't want to get too wrapped up in the cities because you'll spend your whole life there trying to search for ways to control the cities, and you can find them, but for what, to what end, to what, why, right? Like, so people will say, oh, I want to unlock potential. Why? Just live, and it's fine.
yes.
Just let it happen. They're spontaneous. They'll happen. Just enjoy it. Be grateful. And that's it. You don't, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I'm just saying it's a waste of time, because they'll activate and then you'll be able to do it. So just don't worry about it so much.
And okay, so I'm laughing because when you first said you wanted to talk about cities, I thought you were talking about towns, cities, cities.
Oh.
That's what I thought you were talking about, like the way miracles would be coming through cities.
Oh, interesting.
So I just want to clarify for maybe other people, you've been talking about cities, which is spelled Siddhis, I think.
Yes.
And so you're talking about spiritual gifts,
yes.
I guess we could say.
Yes.
And I'm so glad you brought this up, because to me, at least, this feels like miracles for us to be able to do these things, as you've mentioned. And you have so many cities that you haven't even talked about, channeling and astral travel. Like your cities are off the charts. And I love that you're saying that these are natural things for us to experience, and also that we're not in control of them. They come through in divine order. And I want to just quickly share a city experience that I had, which my human still is like, did that really happen? Was that really possible? And I think that's part of maybe what we're traversing, is getting over like the disbelief, as we can more ground ourselves in, yes, we are divine beings. Yes, we are spirit. Yes, all these things are happening. It's not just that we're crazy or making this stuff up. So I had a spontaneous healing in the Akashic records. I feel maybe I've been in the Akashic records in other lifetimes, because I just was always attracted to the Akashic records in this lifetime. And this was around a very, very, very challenging relationship for me in my life that I had really been trying to heal for over a decade. And it got to the point one night where I just asked Spirit, from this, like, I think very pure, very heartfelt intention to help bring peace with this person in my life. And I was guided to go into the Akashic records, and Jesus and Mother Mary were there. They often are for me. And I was led through this amazing process where I saw these snippets of about 5 to 6 past lives with this person, and they were all really traumatic. And then I was led into, I have to say, it was a healing pool. That was what it seemed like, a healing pool by Jesus and Mother Mary. And I saw energy just like flow out of me into the healing pool. And then I was shown these same snippets from these past lives, and the outcome was different in the past lives. The trauma was gone. There were literally different outcomes. Literally, the past, or they're really simultaneous, had shifted. And I still find this incredible. Immediately after that whole experience, I would say about 99% of the pain of my relationship with that person was gone. And it had been so intense for years. So it felt like an instantaneous healing of this karmic pain with this person. And I experienced this one other time in another relationship. But like you said, it's not in my control. Like, it happens sometimes, and I don't know when it will happen.
Yeah. The reason I'm so adamant on the control part of it is because it is the left-hand path of the adept to seek to control the divine gifts of intelligent infinity by activating them without opening the heart. So you could think of it this way. So basically, if you start to go down that route, it will become increasingly apparent that in order for you to do that, you have to shut your heart off. Because the heart, you can access these divine gifts without the heart through the indigo ray, but you can't access heart-based divine gifts without true feeling. Like, basically, the false identity that wants stuff doesn't stir the heart. Like, the heart stirs itself as it calls to things that it resonates with, right? Like, it does as it sort of wishes to do. It doesn't care what the human self is about, right?
Can I just jump in and say it's interesting because your teleportation example and my Akashic Records past life healing example, it seems like both of those were super heart-based. They weren't about like a human, more material world desire. It was about like you wanting to be there for me and me wanting peace.
And I certainly wasn't
another.
And I certainly wasn't thinking of meditate or teleporting or like moving quickly or anything. I wasn't thinking of that as a potential. I was just trusting that I'd somehow get there on time. I was trying to trust that. Like, that's all I was doing, is knowing I'd get there on time. Is what I was trying to do.
Yeah, and in both these examples, it involved like service to another person. It wasn't just an individual desire. It was, right. I wanted to bring peace to a relationship. You wanted to serve. And so that's just very interesting too, that
and so
miracles cities can come through.
Yeah. And so the path to negativity is usually started in the really strengthening the identity and trying to make the identity then call forth miracles or cities or gifts to facilitate the identity's power. Like the identity's self-discerned desires.
Yes.
Sort of ignoring the divine, right? And then the positive entity. So if you're on that positive path, you're gonna find your cities uncontrollable because you don't have any care to really make them work certain ways. You may have parts of you, like when I first encountered some of the gifts, I'm like, ooh, I should use this to figure out what's going on with the money and the stocks and the.
Yeah.
So you realize that you can't use your gifts that way. Like it just doesn't really work for that type of thing, because it's not heart based. Your heart is not interested in that expend in that expenditure of its gift. So
It's really
yeah,
interesting because in shamanism, um, the helping spirits will really only help when there's a purity of intention. It's not for self gain. So the shaman has no power on her or his own. It's just the spirits coming through. So it's the same thing. It has to be very selfless.
yeah.
And interesting too, because I like to pray. I know, as you were saying earlier, you're somewhat beyond that.
No, I pray too.
Um,
I just like to say that we don't have to.
yeah,
But yeah,
yes, no, and I get it. And my prayers have shifted to usually just being, please, the highest and best for all involved. That's now what I just tend to pray on. Just
yeah, that's
highest and best.
the easiest way to just set an aligned intention. Um,
Yes.
like and you can also, I like to say things like which brings harm to none as well. Like that's one that I like as well. So if I'm doing a magic spell, basically, this is what I'd recommend, because not a prayer, a magic spell, which is kind of a prayer, but kind of empowered. But when you're doing a spell, to do something, like first, obviously, why are you doing it? If you're doing it from the ego, then you're starting to go down the left hand path, and by all means explore it. I've been down that path, but that's the service to self path of, like just doing what you want to be powerful, and that's fine. You could do that, or you go the other way, and you start to you're wanting to serve the world. So you may want to cast a spell to help raise the planetary vibration, perhaps, right? So you're oriented more now to just serving everyone, and so that might be what you see as sort of the highest goal. And then as you set all that intention and let all that go, it becomes sort of obvious that, that's the way. Like that's how to kind of do it. That, like, you can go the other way, but at the other way you'll always reach a eventual limitation, and a sort of like you're sort of attaching yourself to a false reality in order to pretend and play as powerful and play as God, basically, as like the all God, right? That's kind of what that entity's trying to do. And that it's really uncomfortable, after a while, like, because the paradox of, like, if I am God, then, like, if I'm as Sean and an entity God, then who created me, right? Like, it doesn't ever get resolved. Into unity, we're like a fractal, right? But the I like to just, like, we'll have feelings probably when the gifts start to open up about how we can use these for self gain, and it's well to think about that. It's a good thing to explore those thoughts. Like, what fear basically is bringing this thought up that makes me say, oh well, maybe I could go trade bitcoins and stuff, and or whatever, and sort of dishonest, like, basically game the systems using my psychic gift or whatever it is. um you can certainly go down that way, but I guess I wanted to just suggest to people that I think most of us that are having these things activate are here for something more than that. And uh, I don't think most of us will find that all that appealing. By the time the gifts start to activate, that will kind of just be like, eh. And I'm sure there are people here that are exploring the other side of it, but um,
Yeah, and
anyways.
I think if you do feel called for sort of just an individual asking and prayer, I love just adding if this is for the highest and best to it. And then it just feels very pure. Like, Spirit, I would like this, but only if it's for the highest and best.
Yeah. If you do want to do an actual magic spell and you are manipulating stuff or feel like you're manipulating stuff, I like to add the brings harm to none. But the idea of harm is an illusion, so it's kind of it's whatever you think. I think if we do say highest and best, that we don't, that's probably enough. But
yeah, we cover all the bases.
I think we do cover all the bases, because who are we to even discern what is harm, right? Like,
yeah,
if if I ask for money and then my uncle gets ran over by a train or something and then leaves me money, please don't make that happen. But did I cause that because I prayed for money? Yeah, maybe. I mean, but was that harmful? I don't know. Who am I to know? My uncle might think it's harmful, right? My uncle might feel that it's harmful, and of course, I would miss his physical presence. My poor uncle. But as far as like the bigger plan, of course, that's what the plan was, sort of. Like, that's,
yeah.
So who am I to say any of that? So anyways, I guess I was just bringing that up because after the cities and the gifts start to open up, there's lots of temptation that gets offered. Lots of temptation and lots of like just chances, opportunities. You keep getting asked. The brighter the star, the deeper or darker the shadow is cast, right? So there's a parasite that follows you throughout the universe, always. I call it parasite, but it's better to call it a friend or a passenger. And it's your shadow. It follows you, and it has different ways of showing itself to you. I'm not talking about Jung's shadow. I'm talking about the spiritual shadow that in our ego shows up sort of as Jung's shadow. But outside of that, there's more shadow. So it's the collective shadow then becomes a thing. So anyways, I'm just saying that the temptations of your parasitic shadow, that you're basically trying to love a parasite all the time, and it never stops. It never ever stops until you merge with Source again. So there's always an adversary or a seeming adversary and there's various levels of that. So one of the adversaries that you come into is sort of pride and greed and these types of things around, look at these powers I've seemed to develop and what can I do with them. So it's a common thing, and just kind of wanted to warn people of that, because it's easy to get lost in some of that nonsense.
Yes.
Usually we'll do stuff like stop caring about money, and then it'll open. Like, just because if we knew if we were too worried about money, then we would not be aligned in our gift giving, basically. So, like if we have too much fear in an area, we're not going to do that.
I'm so sorry. I have to take leave.
Oh, I thought you were like putting your hand up because I mentioned money.
No. I need to take leave from the stream.
No worries. Yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for watching. Appreciate it very much. If you want to check out the course, Namaste Method, that's below. It'll kind of help with relationships and talking to each other, basically. And then also we have our Patreon community, which we are doing a metaphysical monthly meeting on Thursday. So
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. So oh yeah, so I'm gonna send out the thing. I'm gonna be doing like a kind of mini version of a course in it. So, but we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, you have a new course that you're hopefully going to be offering as well for
Yeah.
people to, yeah, great, exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. So much love to everybody, and so exciting that we're all capable of bringing through miracles.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.